my right hand of God. Shine on these broads. Stay on my job. Grind with my squad. 100 racks on my car. No license at all. No 10 on that thing. That's how we ball. All these flawed. Suckers and frauds. My circle so small. Stick to my script and just ball. First I pick up my and we shut down the mall. Had to pick up the tip. She tried to pay for it all. Bring some yak on my plate. Garlic noodles and steak. Bouncing out the ballet. With all these tats on my face.
Hello. Welcome. I'm back with you again. So much has happened since the last time I was with you. I mean, there's been mass shootings, car chases, kidnappings, you name it. It has happened since our last talk. And all of this brought to mind something that I was talking to a young person about, and they were wondering, where was God in all of this, and what is God doing about all of this? And it brought to mind something that I wanted to talk to you about today. And I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about it from the book that I've written called The Holy Ghost Has Got a New Dance. Because what I want you to understand is what you're seeing in our communities and in our neighborhoods, they're not new. These kind of things have been going on for centuries. And the same questions have been asked. So we're going to talk a little bit about those things, and I'm going to reference a couple of people who had the same questions, who were going through the same thing that you are and I are going through right now, even as I speak. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about a prophet. His name was Habakkuk. And Habakkuk was going through, and he was frustrated, and he was seeing what was going on around him, and he asked some questions of God. Here's the thing I want you to understand about what we're about to talk about. In his community at this time, he saw all the injustices and the inequities and the social things that were going around that were directly encountering his people. And he wondered, how can God allow these sort of things to come against his people? And so when the book of Habakkuk opens up, chapter 1, shows a lot of his frustrations and a lot of questions that he was asking God, and why are these things going on? Essentially what he was saying is, how could God allow some of these injustices against his people to come against him at this time? Let me give you a little history. Israel was going through a lot of different changes, and God was using different nations to help get his people in line. At this particular time of Habakkuk, there was the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans were the type of people that were nuts. They were off the chain. They were doing things that were corrupt. They were stealing from the people. They were legislating different things that was oppressive, and the poor people were being exploited, basically. And Habakkuk had saw this, and he was not happy with it. So there's about 3 questions that Habakkuk was going through with regard to the things that were going around in his community. See, we're going to be talking about 2 people. We're going to talk about Habakkuk, and we're going to talk about Job. See, Habakkuk was more of the question, why is this happening to us? And so when we think about that, he also had 3 other questions that he was asking of God. And he was asking why. Basically, why is all of this happening to us? The second thing he was crying out, how long? How long are we supposed to be going through these type of situations and injustices, and how long will we have to go through this? And then he asked a good question. He said, where is God? Where is God in all of this that we're going through? And a lot of people today see the same things that were going on in our communities now as Habakkuk saw in his community then. And they're asking the same questions. Well, the book of Habakkuk is only about 3 chapters. And what it shows is in the first chapter, Habakkuk was kind of talking to God about what was going on. He was a little frustrated, so I'm guessing the tone of his voice wasn't quite pleasant. And in the second chapter, God answers Habakkuk. He talks to him and tells him what he sees and why he's doing what he's doing. And in the last chapter of Habakkuk, what we see is Habakkuk is understanding that as humans, and even if we pray, we cannot allow our prayers to try to change what God has planned. In other words, when God has something plan for us and we don't quite understand it, our human prayers, putting our human hands to it won't change God's plan. However, God's plan will allow us to be able to deal with situations as we're going through that plan, which is why the theme of Habakkuk is the just shall live by faith. So let's explore a little bit of things of what happened in Habakkuk and why this is important to you. See, I see in Habakkuk the same type of prophet that I saw in Tupac and Nipsey and even Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. All of those kind of people saw the things that were going on. And so I wanted to read a couple of things from the perspective of Nipsey, mostly because he was our last person that we spoke about. So I want to kind of tie a few things together and show you how my book has helped you to understand how those things happen. So first of all, I want to read something to you. I want to read a quote to you from one of the authorities. And it says here that Habakkuk was not a self-centered person, concerned only with the comfort and safety of himself and his family. As a true patriot, he was deeply depressed by the moral and spiritual conditions about him. He loved his nation, and he knew that it was moving ever closer to the precipice of destruction by continuing to break the laws of God. Therefore, two anguished questions burst forth from his lips: how long and why? And when we look at the life of Nipsey Hussle, we understand that he had the same type of questions and concern about his community. We understand that when he saw things that were going on in his community, he saw to take it upon himself to make the change. So the other thing that was happening in the times of Habakkuk that is also happening now is, even with the righteous people that were gathered around and that were going through this type of thing, one of the things Habakkuk noticed was this: even the saved righteous people who were trying to live in this time of the Chaldeans, they were mimicking what the Chaldeans were doing. In other words, they were getting more involved in the injustices, the crimes. They were getting more involved in mistreating one another. Why? Well, because they saw that it prospered them. And don't we do that even in our community? When we see that things are going well, when we see that people who perpetrate crimes against us, and when we see the injustice system, and we see that our enemy seems to be prospering from those things, we begin to think and get confused that maybe God is more on their side than our side. So we begin to mimic some of the things we see people doing, and we call it blessings. The problem with that is they're not blessings. God hates sin. He hates sin whether it's coming from those who don't believe in him and even those who believe in him, because he's a holy God and he can't look upon sin, but he's got to do something about it. So when we have the people in our community imitating the unrighteous behavior of those that are around us, thinking that that's going to get us over, then we are doing as much to ourselves as they are doing to us. And that's another thing that Habakkuk wasn't happy with. So as we look continually at what was going on in the Habakkuk time and compare it to what was going on in our time, we begin to understand that because we are who we are, we cannot afford to imitate that same unrighteousness that's being provoked upon us as a people. We cannot continue to do the things that contribute to that and expect God to bless us regardless of that. That's not how it works. And that's not what I want us to get involved in. Because when we start to understand that God cannot look upon sin, whether it's coming from those who believe in him and those who not, that he has to do something about it. Our problem is we want him to do something about it right now, our way, because we said so. And that doesn't happen. God does things because God is who he is, and he's going to do things because of what he does in the way and the order in which he wants to do it. So sometimes he will use other nations to kind of help bring us in line. Another thing that was happening in the times of Habakkuk was the very people who believed in God were the very people that were participating in idol worship and money being their God and bringing themselves to a point where they were looking just as bad as the people who were over them. And so Habakkuk was crying out to God about this. Why are you allowing these people to do this to us? And we're beginning to look like them. And he wasn't happy with that, and he wasn't happy with them. So let's look at a couple of things real quick. Let's compare what was going on with Habakkuk in our community. Let's do that right now. In our community, we have families that are afraid to come outside. In our community, we have people that are being shot for no reason at all, unarmed. We have people that are being mistreated. We have the justice system that tips the scale based upon who you are or how you look or the color of your skin. We have crime that is so manifested in our own neighborhoods that we begin to kill one another and apply to the disloyalty or the disunity of our community. And see, all of these things are what our enemy wants us to do. He wants us to kill each other. He wants us to ask God how long and why. See, our enemy doesn't care about how religious you are. He doesn't mind you being religious. What he doesn't want you to do is to be a disciple of Jesus, to have those things changed. Because faith without works is dead. So religion that doesn't do anything is a dead religion. And faith without religion and doing those things to change the things in our neighborhood, he's happy with you doing nothing. He's happy with Christians who go to work, come home, pray every now and then, and blame everybody else for what's going on in our communities. That wasn't what Nipsey did. That wasn't what all of the prophets that have come did in our community. They wanted change. Change is difficult. Sometimes change is dangerous. But we have to understand change is inevitable. It must happen. So while we're busy fussing at God about why he's not doing anything, as in the times of Habakkuk, why aren't we doing anything? Why aren't we putting our hands to our faith and changing things in our community? That's the whole point. Let me read something else to you. There was another theologian, his name was Hebert, and what he said is this: Habakkuk's concern, his central concern for justice, places him solidly in the tradition of Israel's prophets. Like his predecessor Isaiah and his contemporary Jeremiah, Habakkuk calls attention to and criticizes the miscarriage of justice in the political, judicial, and economic institutions of Judea and of its capital, Jerusalem. Also, in the tradition of Israel's prophets, he predicts the demise of this unjust society as a result of coming events in which God will punish its unjust leaders and reestablish equity and proper order. The theme of Habakkuk is this: the just shall live by faith. Here's the mistake I don't want us to make. Even though it says the just shall live by faith, it does not mean that the just will do nothing by their faith. It means that we have to pray, ask God to change situations, and to let him work his plan. But here's the key that I want you to remember. God will work his plan through us. God will work his plan through those people who are called by his name. He will work his plan through us, which is why it is very, very difficult to understand why the church chooses to take a very outside approach, a very head in the sand type of approach to the situations that are going on right outside of his doors. We have to be very, very careful to understand that we cannot be as bad as those we blame for the things that are happening against us in our community. We can't blame injustice on the justice system if we're being injustice with ourselves. We cannot blame killing on people when we are killing ourselves. We have to bring ourselves together, united as one family, in order to make changes that are happening, because the Chaldeans are in our neighborhood. The Chaldeans are right next door. The Chaldeans are in your church. We have to be careful that we don't look like them and act like them and then blame them for what we're doing. It is very serious at one point to understand that as we move and breathe and have our being in a just God, he believes that we are supposed to be free. Let's act like we're free. Let's think like we're free. Let's develop a strategy to put in place so that regardless of what's going on around us, we still stand strong, listening to the voice of God and acting as a disciple of Jesus Christ. Here's the other thing I want to bring to the point real quick to you. When we encounter these things in our neighborhood, we can react one of two ways. We can react with our emotions, or we can react with a thought process, a strategy, a plan. So if you don't like something that's going on, you have to change it. But in order to change it, you can't be out there hooping and hollering and based upon your emotions and mad and anger to expect those changes to happen. When we see that what is going on in our community, we have to step back and develop a strategic plan. Because see, our enemy doesn't expect us to make a plan. He expects us to react on our emotions. When we react upon a plan, we put a strategy in place, God is with that. He will help us to turn things around. But we have to turn things around based upon our faith in him, knowing that if he's in us and we're in him, there's nothing that can stop us. There's nothing that can keep us from doing the things that make us better. Conversely, we have to work this through our young people. See, our young people are the ones whom our enemy is attacking because he wants to rob them of that faith. So watch this. So if the theme of Habakkuk is the just shall live by their faith, and the enemy robs our young people of their faith, what then do our young people live by? We have to be able to understand that when we're placed in a particular situation, regardless of what that situation is, we have to bring ourselves to the point of understanding that once we pray about it, God's got it. But he's got it because he's going to give us the action plan on how to get those things changed. We're going to also talk about something else that's here in Habakkuk. Let me read something else to you because it's very, very apropos to what we're talking about. It says, much of Habakkuk can be applied to present-day social conditions in inner city. The story of this prophet's wrestling with the question of where is God in the midst of social injustice and violence seems appropriate within our inner city context. Other questions generated by and continued by the frustration of God's non-involvement, people are asking how long and why. See, the Chaldeans can be envisioned as the oppressive institutions that protect and in many cases produce the same type of violence and inequity and injustice against God's inner city peoples. That is, a justice system, political system, and even the religious systems within the church. So when young people have the idea that the Bible is an antiquated book and it doesn't have anything to do with what's going on today, you got to step back and take another look at it. Because I want to present it to you in a way to let you understand that everything in the Bible has implications to what we're doing today. You have to understand that even though we see all of these things going on in our neighborhood and we see all of these injustices going on, the only way that we can fix these things is with the unity. The only thing that we can do to help fix these things in our community is to make our community better. And we make those community better by making ourselves as individual people better. Perhaps the greatest and most significant thing that I want to make sure that we bring out in this book of Habakkuk is this. He had a vision, and God told him to write the vision and to make it plain so that those who read the vision can run with it. That comes from planning. That comes from strategic thinking. That comes from being able to write something out, write a plan, make it work for those who read it so that they can take that plan and make it work for them. This does not happen if you react to the things in our community with anger. This does not happen if you react to the things in our community by looking like those who oppress our community. See, you cannot be the oppressor yourself and complain about oppression. Does that make sense? So we have to understand that as a people, we have to come together as a people. As a people, I'm not talking about just black people or white people or Mexican people. I'm talking about a people gathered together against one common enemy, and that one common enemy is the enemy that wants to kill us all, regardless of our color. When we go to God with something that's bothering us, we have to be able to hear him and not be afraid to go ahead and do what he tells us to do to change it. That's very important in this world. That's very important in your life. He's going to start with you, clean you up first, before you can dare think about cleaning up someone else. And then when you see things that are going on in our community, make a plan, develop a strategy, make it work. When it works, show somebody else how to make it work. And if we do that, reach one, teach one, we will find ourselves in a position where we will not ask anymore where God is, because we will know where God is. We won't be asking ourselves, why doesn't God do something? Because we've already done what God has told us to do. We won't be asking how long, because our strategy and plan will put a length of time together to have the injustices and the things that are happening in our community cut off. Please understand that we have the power to do so. And because we have the power to do so, we need to be doing so. So that's what this is all about. Now, in our next session, and our next time I come to you, I'm going to be talking to you about the book of Job. See, Habakkuk was the prophet that asked the question, why us? Job is the kind of a story that I'm going to talk to you about that asks the question, why me? And there's a difference. And when you start looking at the two differences between Habakkuk and Job and the questions that they asked, there's one common thread between the two books altogether. That one common thread between the two books is faith. So we're going to talk about that in the next session. I'm going to compare the two books together for you so you can see how that works. Why Habakkuk talks about why us, and why Job talks about why me. My name is Pops, Pastor Willie. You can get in touch with me with the information down below. If you have questions, text me, call me. Do whatever it takes for you to get in contact with me, because I really want to be able to give this strategy. I really want to be able to help us understand how we get from this point to a brand new point in our lives. So thank you very much for being with me today. I'll see you next time.